machine. He denied the reports that his close aides were in conversations with Russia as fake. I thought this was, despite the kind of odd banter and odd joke with reporters, it seemed to show a president very frustrated with his current position. And that's what came across. That's the tone that came across, despite his demeanour throughout being one of, look, I'm here just bringing the fight to you rather than letting my aides do it for me.
He said he was enjoying himself and he told more than one reporter to sit down. They can't have reacted kindly to that.
No, I think we're not used to this style of president. This is not what we're used to. But remember, this is a businessman who has been in control of his own empire for a very long time. He hasn't had to take orders from anyone. He hasn't had to put up with the kind of negative press coverage which he's had over the last 3 weeks. From his perspective, he thinks, look, I was elected to do a job. Here I am trying to do that job. And all I'm seeing when I'm turning on the television is bad stuff in kind of his words. And he's finding that very, very frustrating. And he's finding governing rather than campaigning a very difficult prospect. He's holding a rally on Saturday, which I can't help feeling is his way and his staff's way of saying, look, let's show you your supporters, rather than you turning on the television every 5 minutes and seeing all these negative headlines. And I think he's frustrated with the way that his aides are fighting for him, which is normal White House protocol. And instead, he's decided today, look, I'm going to fight my own corner. I'm going to take these questions. I'm going to field these questions and I'm going to deal with the press. And yet there were moments where even the press were laughing and he was laughing with them. But at the same time, there was that tone of, you sit down, I'll answer your question. No, that's a bad question. That's a good question. He was at times combative and confrontational with the press, and it will not do his relationship with the press any good.
He talked at length about the achievements of the past 4 weeks. Briefly, Laura, what policy achievements did he cite?
He talked about his immigration ban, which he said had gone smoothly. He blamed, as you just heard there, the court for it not going as he'd like, and a new executive order will come out next week. He talked about Obamacare. He said that is underway, although there's still not a plan to replace the Obamacare that he's trying to get rid of. He talked about financial controls. He said he's going to create jobs. He talked about how he's going to be the job-creating president. So these are his achievements, and he went on at length to try to show what he's doing in just a few weeks. He said much more, the big stuff is still to come. His supporters will love that. His supporters will point and say, look, this is a president that we've elected that is doing the job that we elected him to do. But at the same time, he's finding the reality of governing perhaps slower, and the whole way that Congress works a lot slower than what he's used to.
Laura Bicker in Washington. So what's been the reaction to President Trump's assertion that General Flynn, his now departed national security advisor, had done nothing wrong in talking to the Russians before the new administration took office? We asked Daniel Twining, who's a former advisor to the Republican Senator John McCain, and now director of the Asia program with a big foreign policy think tank in the US.
I think he did a lot of things wrong, and what was so striking is that he broke with decades of precedent, both as a former U.S. military officer. They tend to take a rather hawkish line towards our Russian adversaries, and as national security advisor. So I think he broke a lot of rules. I mean, he also happened to be an ideologue who I think was trying very hard to please Donald Trump, which is very different from the job the National Security Advisor is meant to be doing. So
you'd argue with the thesis that part of his job was to sound out foreign opinion and make contact with lots of foreign countries?
I'm afraid so. The National Security Advisor's job is to advise the President of the United States and to coordinate the National Security Council, which in turn coordinates the foreign policy and defense functions of the U.S. government.
Unconfirmed press reports indicate that retired Vice Admiral Robert Harwood has been offered the job of National Security Advisor. What do we know about this man and his career?
We know that he was a Navy SEAL, which is among our most elite Special Forces units. We know that he was a very effective commander on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan. We also know, quite interestingly, that he worked for General Mattis, who's now Defense Secretary. And finally, he had a several-year stint on the U.S. National Security Council as a military officer there. So if he takes the NSA job, he would actually be going back to an agency that he knows.
Why would he want the job?
Because the world is in crisis. American foreign policy has looked adrift, I think, for some time, including well before Donald Trump came onto the scene. And this